What would you do if a cop slapped your son in court? And the judge said nothing? Would you scream? Would you fight? Or would you walk in and change everything without saying a word? They struck Malik Freeman, a 16-year-old black teenager, in open court. No warning, no justice, no voice raised in his defense. But someone was watching. Elijah Freeman, 65, a quiet veteran with nothing left to prove until they gave him something to stand for again. What followed wasn't chaos, it was calculated, controlled, a storm in slow motion. A sealed folder, a hidden identity, a federal reckoning. As the courtroom tried to bury Malik, the truth rose, and with it, the kind of justice that doesn't yell but destroys quietly. They slapped my son in court, Elijah says. Now the world stands for him. This is more than a story. It's a question we all must ask. What does justice sound like? When it doesn't have to speak? I was 1 minute late, just one. And that's all it took for the world to change. I stepped through the courtroom door right as it happened, the sound sharp, cruel, echoing off the cold walls. Smack. A slap, hard and deliberate. My boots, worn from years of walking nowhere, froze mid-step, and there he was, me son Malik, 16, wrists cuffed, face turned, blood trickling from his lip. He didn't scream. He didn't fall, he just lifted his hand, wiped the blood away, and stared straight at the man who hit him. Deputy Curtis. I'd seen that face before, not his, exactly, but that look. The kind of man who thinks a badge gives him the right to rewrite the truth. Malik didn't flinch, didn't cry. He smiled. Then he said, calm, quiet, but cutting clean through the silence. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. That was my boy. Not because he smiled, but because he knew what was coming next. And as I took another step forward into that courtroom, into that reckoning, I knew something else. They weren't looking at a boy anymore. They were about to see his father. I didn't rush the next step. I just stood at the back, watching. It wasn't time yet. Across the courtroom, a young black woman in a navy blazer leaned beside Malik, me boy. She moved with care, not urgency, like someone who understood what it meant to be watched, judged, misread. She crouched beside him gently, her voice soft. I'm Aisha. I've been asked to represent you. Can you tell me your name? Malik didn't look at her. He just stared ahead, hands folded like he was sitting through another test he'd already passed. Then, after a pause, he said, it not bitter, not angry, just heavy. Names don't matter here. And I knew exactly what he meant. In rooms like this, names get buried under assumptions. Aisha blinked. She wasn't expecting that, but then her eyes caught something. The chain. A thin silver chain around his neck, half tucked beneath his collar. The kind soldiers wear close to the skin. She leaned in slightly, not invading, just curious. The light caught it for a split second. Freeman, Elijah. Her expression shifted. It was subtle, just a flicker of recognition, like a page had turned in her mind. She didn't say anything right away, but I saw it, the calculation, the curiosity, the quiet decision to look deeper. That's when I knew this woman wasn't just here to file motions. She was going to start asking questions they didn't want answered. And for the first time since I stepped into that courtroom, I let myself breathe. Because Malik didn't need to yell. He carried strength the way I used to carry Orderstite to the chest, never for show. They called for recess like it meant something. Like a 15-minute break would undo the damage done by a backhand in front of a judge, like the smell of burnt coffee and legal pads could drown out the taste of blood on my boy's lip. I stayed in the shadows of the room, leaning against the far column, arms crossed over my old jacket. I didn't want to draw attention, not yet. I needed to see who moved, who didn't, and who showed their teeth when they thought no one was looking. That's when they came. 2 deputies, not Curtis, but the kind of men who shared his arrogance like it was part of the uniform. They didn't rush. They strolled toward Malik, calm as can be. Routine sweep, one said flatly, as if anyone believed that. Before Aisha could even stand, they were already at the table. They tore open his backpack like it held secrets that would make headlines. Pages of his notebook flew onto the floor. A folded math worksheet skidded beneath a bench. His sandwich wrapped in foil with his name written in black marker was tossed aside like it was garbage. Malik just sat there. Didn't blink. Didn't ask why. Didn't move a muscle. It's a look I'd seen before on men in combat zones when survival meant becoming still enough to disappear. Future inmate, one of them muttered to his partner, loud enough for everyone to hear. And the judge? Judge Barnes walked back into the room right as it happened. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask a question. He just raised an eyebrow when Deputy Curtis reappeared, tossed a folded sheet of paper under the bench and said, "Your Honor, I'd like to add obstruction and resisting arrest to the report." The judge clicked his pen, scribbled something, and said, "Charges noted." That was it. No review. No objection. Just like adding cream to cough routine. Thoughtless. Aisha stood frozen beside Malik. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't yell, not yet. I could see something shift behind her eyes, though like she just realized this wasn't a hearing. It was a setup. Malik finally moved, quietly, precisely. He reached down and began repacking his bag, page by page, pen by pen. He even brushed the dust off his sandwich before tucking it back in. There was no anger in the way he moved, just rhythm, muscle memory. That's when Aisha leaned in and whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but Malik didn't answer. He just zipped the bag shut. She sat there beside him a moment longer, watching, reading him, and then her gaze slid to the chain around his neck again. That was the moment she knew. My boy wasn't alone. He had someone watching, someone waiting. And the courtroom, they hadn't even begun to understand who they just humiliated. You could feel it the moment she stood. Aisha didn't raise her voice, didn't rush her steps. She walked to the center of that courtroom like a soldier walking into fog, nervous but ready. She held something small in her hand, a flash drive, tucked between her fingers like a blade she'd been sharpening in silence. "Your Honor," she began, voice steady, eyes locked on the judge, "I have new evidence, civilian security footage from the corner of Kelman and 9th. It documents the incident Deputy Curtis described earlier." Judge Barnes didn't blink. He just raised an eyebrow and nodded to the clerk. Aisha handed over the drive. The clerk inserted it into the courtroom monitor. The screen flickered once, then twice, and then the video played. It was grainy, tilted. The angle was from a storefront camera, probably never meant to capture justice, but justice showed up anyway. There he was, Malik, barely more than a silhouette, standing between Deputy Curtis and an elderly black man who looked frail, confused, clutching a cane with trembling hands. The man was speaking words too soft to catch, but Curtis shoved him. Hard. The old man stumbled backward, nearly fell, but Malik stepped in. Not with fists. Not with shouting. Just two open hands, arms outstretched, a human shield. He didn't touch Curtis. Didn't provoke him. He simply stood in the way. That's it. And for a moment, the entire room leaned forward. Even the air felt like it paused. Aisha turned to the bench. This directly contradicts the deputy's sworn statement. Malik Freeman didn't resist arrest. He intervened to stop excessive force. I felt something stir in the back of the room. Someone shifted in their seat. A quiet gasp escaped from somewhere to my right. Even the bailiff looked uneasy. But Judge Barnes? He removed his glasses, polished them with a handkerchief, and without looking at the screen, said, "Unverified, dismissed." Just like that. Truth, shoved aside like it never mattered. The room didn't gasp this time. It exhaled, quiet, bitter, defeated. Aisha stood frozen, lips parting as if to protest, but she saw it. Malik had already reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded slip of paper. He slid it across the table toward her. She opened it slowly. One line, written in calm, even print. "Don't act, watch." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. And then I saw it. He adjusted his sleeve. Not casually, intentionally, deliberately. revealing a black digital watch with a plain face and a dull metal clasp, the kind only certain people wore, the kind I used to wear when I was deployed under classified directives, a distress device. 1 tap to send a location ping. 2 taps to signal backup. 3 taps meant everything's on the line. Aisha saw it too. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. She looked at Malik, really looked at him, and I could tell she finally understood. He wasn't sitting still because he was scared. He was waiting because someone was coming. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. I hadn't stood in a courtroom since the day they folded the flag and handed it to Mimi wife's funeral. After that, I disappeared, not from the world but from what it asked of me. I did my duty. I bled in silence, and when the war was over, I tried to believe the fight was too. But it never ended, it just changed uniforms. And today, it wore a badge. Deputy Curtis smirked like a man certain no one could touch him. The judge looked bored. The room had already filed Malik away as another angry black boy with nowhere to go but down. So I stood up. Slow, deliberate, let them hear the sound of boots that hadn't forgotten how to stand tall. "I'd like to be heard," I said, voice steady. Judge Barnes narrowed his eyes. "And you are?" I reached into my inside pocket, pulled out a leather case, and flipped it open with the same motion I'd used 20 years ago in active combat zones. Military ID. Name: Elijah Freeman. Rank: Chief Warrant Officer, retired. Clearance: Tier 1, Joint Intelligence Command. The room fell quiet. I wasn't done. From beneath my jacket, I pulled out a thick manila folder, sealed, stamped, marked in red. Department of Defense, classified disposition. Authorized release per federal request. I laid it on the defense table. "Contained in this file," I said, "is the reason your deputy has made the gravest mistake of his career and why my son's silence wasn't submission, it was protocol." The judge adjusted his glasses. Curtis shifted his stance. I opened the folder. 4 years ago, I continued, while stationed under an intelligence program in Southeast Asia, I uncovered a transnational trafficking pipeline. The people behind it weren't foreign cartels. I looked straight at Curtis. They were American contractors, former law enforcement, some still active, including one, Curtis Ray, then embedded as a liaison during joint missions. Curtis's smile vanished. 3 of my men died, trying to bring the truth home. 2 files were sealed. The third, I pointed to Malik, is sitting right there. There was a tremor in the room now, not of fear, but of reckoning. After the mission was exposed, I was granted retirement under sealed immunity. Malik and I entered a federal protection program after 2 of the arrested officers' cases were dismissed and leaked. He was transferred between cities. Every school, every change of name, was part of a file you've all conveniently ignored. I turned a page in the file and held up a photograph. Curtis, younger, standing beside military vehicles in Iraq, a smile just as smug. A report beside Ithis' own disciplinary record. 3 separate reports of falsified testimony. 3. All buried, I said, by internal affairs, every time, including one dismissed by this very judge 2 years ago. Judge Barnes went pale. "You thought he was alone," I said, eyes now locked on Curtis. "You thought you could slap him, silence him, bury him like the others." I leaned forward. "But I'm still alive, and the mission never ended. I didn't come to that courtroom to speak. I came to stand. To let my presence do what my words had never been allowed to. But the moment Curtis laid his hands on my sonmi-sonen, the system turned away like it didn't see. I knew silence wasn't enough. So I rose. Slow, deliberate. Every scar in my knees remembered war. But this was the battle I was made for. "Your Honor," I said, stepping forward. "My name is Elijah Freeman, retired Chief Warrant Officer, United States Army, Tier 1 Intelligence Command." I didn't wait for permission. I laid the sealed folder on the bench with the weight of a nation's forgotten conscience. I am formally filing a request for federal review of this courtroom on the basis of civil rights violations, judicial bias, and obstruction of justice under color of law. The air shifted. Not a sound, but the way a room changes when someone speaks what everyone else was too afraid to say. Barnes scoffed. This is a regular procedure. So was slapping a minor in front of a judge. I interrupted. Curtis tensed. I didn't look at him. I have here documented proof that Deputy Curtis Ray falsified multiple arrest records over the last 6 years. 3 of those reports were dismissed in pretrial by you, Judge Barnes. All 3 involved excessive force against black civilians under the age of 21. The judge adjusted his robe like it might shield him from the truth. These aren't accusations, they're patterns, buried by silence and protected by power. I opened the folder, revealing a photo, Curtis, grinning in fatigues, arms slung around a man who would later disappear in an unsolved case. Next to it, internal reports stamped "Do Not Release." Names, timestamps, complaints all ignored. Behind me, I heard a gasp. A woman clutching her purse sat straighter. One of the reporters dropped her pen. You covered for him, I said flatly, and in doing so, you put my son in his path. I turned to Malik, who still sat with his hands folded in his lap, calm, steady, cuffed. He didn't need to rise. His dignity already stood taller than any man in that room. And that's when the courtroom doors opened. 2 men entered, dark suits, federal issue, no neckties, just quiet, grim authority. They moved like they'd been waiting for the moment they were finally allowed to do what needed to be done. One turned to the judge. Sir, we're from the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. You are hereby suspended from your duties pending full investigation. The judge blinked, stunned. On what grounds? The other agent didn't flinch. Systemic negligence. Repeated dismissal of credible misconduct. You'll receive full documentation within the hour. Curtis took a step back. He knew what was coming. Deputy Ray, said the second agent, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, falsification of records, and violation of federal witness protection protocols. Curtis opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He reached for his badge, then hesitated, as if the metal might protect him now. It didn't. The agent stepped in, swift and professional. His arms were pulled back, the cuffs clicked. Not tight. Not rough. Just final. The courtroom erupted. Phones were out, flashes sparked, a low chorus of gasps, murmurs, the kind of sound that happens when history suddenly turns in the middle of an ordinary day. Curtis's face, usually smug, was pale. The sweat on his forehead caught the fluorescent light above the bench. He was escorted out, past the gallery, past the boy he tried to humiliate. He didn't dare look at Malik. That was the punishment. The agents handed me a final document. Your son's file has been reviewed and cleared, all charges nullified. His record will be sealed and expunged within the day. Aisha, standing beside Malik, looked at me with something between awe and relief. She turned, uncuffed him slowly, reverently, like she knew she was undoing more than shackles. And Malik. He stood. Not triumphant, not proud, just free. We didn't say a word to each other, we didn't have to. It was already said. The moment we turned toward the doors, they opened again, this time from the outside. Media. Lights, microphones, the crush of camera crews and reporters pushing against velvet ropes. I caught the edge of a headline already being typed on someone's laptop. Federal agents storm local courtroom. Officer arrested on civil rights violations. Malik stepped into the sunlight like he'd been waiting for it all day. Malik, do you have anything to say to your supporters? What message do you want to send to young people watching this? A reporter thrust a mic toward him. He paused, let the noise fill the space. Then answered softly. Sometimes, the loudest justice doesn't yell. It just walks in, and stands. He didn't smile, didn't raise his fists, just stood beside me. Like the man I'd raised. Like the warrior I never had to teach to fight. Behind us, the crowd buzzed. Headlines rolled. And somewhere inside I knew. the mission wasn't over. But for the first time in years, it was working. It's been a year. A full rotation of the sun. Since that day in court, the day my son bled in silence, and I decided I'd bled in silence long enough. Funny thing is, I don't remember the noise, not the press, not the reporters shouting questions, not the cameras that followed us home. What I remember is the quiet. The moment just after they cuffed Curtis. The room didn't cheer, it didn't erupt, it exhaled. Like justice had been holding its breath. Now, it's spring again. The dogwoods are blooming outside the courthouse, white petals falling like snow that forgives. I sit on the same bench where I stood with Malik 12 months ago, only this time, we're not surrounded by chaos. Just sunlight, warm pavement, and the soft rustle of branches overhead. He's beside me, taller now, or maybe just standing straighter. There's a stillness in him. I recognize it's the kind of quiet only those who've seen too much can wear without effort. We don't talk much these days, we don't need to. We've learned how to speak through presence, and presence, I've found, can be louder than any declaration. At our feet, bolted into the concrete, is a bronze plaque. It's simple, no dedication, no signature, just words. Respect is not owed by appearance. It's earned by sacrifice. Malik helped draft the line himself, said it came to him in a dream. I believed him. The city tried to host a ceremony for its unveiling. He declined, said he didn't want flashbulbs at a moment meant for reflection, so they installed it quietly, just like he asked. Now, people stop and read it on their way into the courthouse. Some nod, some pause. A few take pictures, post it online with hashtags like Justice Was Served or Freeman Family Legacy. That last one always makes me smile, because legacy was never what I was after. Survival was. Been a while since we sat like this, I say, breaking the silence. Malik glances sideways. Feels shorter. I chuckle. That's age catching up to your old man. He smirks, just slightly. Across the courtyard, I spot a new group of high schoolers being led through the building on a civics tour. I watch as one of them, a young black boy, probably 16, maybe 17, stops to read the plaque. He doesn't take a picture. He just places his hand on the metal like he's touching something sacred. That does something to me, deep down. They slapped my son in court, I say aloud, not to Malik, not to myself, but to the wind, the memory, the moment. But now, the world stands for him. Malik doesn't answer. He just closes his eyes, lifts his face to the sun, and breathes. The DOJ did their work. Barnes was removed from the bench. Curtis pled out. The other cases, the ones swept under the rug, well, they were pulled into the light one by one. It didn't fix everything. But it opened a door, and sometimes, that's all a man needs to walk through a door he wasn't supposed to reach. Malik's record was cleared, his name restored. He's starting college in the fall, criminal justice, of all things. Told me he wants to become a public defender, but not the kind that waits for permission to speak. That part made me proud. I still wear my old army jacket, not because I miss the war, but because it reminds me who I was when I learned the value of silence, and when I finally learned how to break it. The world sees my son now, not as a threat, not as a case file, but as something unshakable, a reminder that dignity isn't granted, it's chosen. People ask me if I feel redeemed. I tell them no. Redemption is something you seek for doing wrong. This was about remembrance. Remembrance of every boy who sat in a courtroom, cuffed and judged before he ever spoke. Remembrance of every father who stood too late, or couldn't stand at all. Remembrance of the truth buried beneath uniforms, gavels, and gritted teeth. I place my hand on Malik's shoulder. He doesn't flinch. And in that moment, with the sun warm on our skin, I realize something I hadn't said out loud until now. We didn't win because we fought, I murmur. We won because we endured. Malik opens his eyes, smiles, then let's keep enduring. So we sit a little longer, just a father and a son, on a bench outside a courthouse, beneath a plaque that doesn't need our names. Because the world remembers. And that's enough.